Hey everybody, welcome. In this episode, we're going to be talking about pages and routing in Next.js. Now, if you're coming from React, I think you'll find the experience quite nice. Next.js is going to use naming conventions and folder structure to automatically route different URLs to pages. Now, I know some people don't like having to follow exact conventions and would rather type it out exactly in code, but I personally think that this is much simpler and it helps keep projects consistent. You know exactly what folder structure to expect. So right now we just have index, but by the end of this video, I want to be able to have a page for customers and a page for passing in a specific customer by ID, such as 50. So we're going to talk about how to build those pages. But first, I wanted to mention that I did commit this to a repo, and all of the initial changes from the previous episode are in changes to index.tsx. So if you want to follow along with the repo, I'll show you where to find that. I will create a new repo, and this will be called React Next. And I'll make this public and create repository. And then I'll just copy these lines over and upload this to GitHub. So if you want to get the code, you can go to that URL. And from that page, you can jump into any of the prior commits and view the code at that point in time. I like to do this just so if I screw up, I can redo and go back to where I was, but it's also helpful for everybody watching. So let's go ahead and try to create a customers page. So it's going to be all dependent on this pages folder. Inside of here, we have one folder called API, and then we have two files, this _app.tsx and index.tsx. Now yours might be JS if you're not using TypeScript. Index.tsx is the home page, and by convention, this is going to be available just at localhost 3000. My server's not currently on, but this is where it would show up. You can think of your _app file as a root component that's going to surround everything else. So if you had to, for example, surround everything with a custom theme, you could do that inside of _app.tsx. You could do the same exact thing if you're looking for something to correlate this with. In React, we had the index.js file and the app.js file. We did most of our writing inside of app.js, but you could also write stuff inside of index.js if you wanted to surround app by some code. So for example, this is what an index.js looks like, where all we're really doing is rendering the app component. In our previous videos, we didn't do a whole lot inside of index.js. We just kept it to app.js, but some of the surrounding code, if you scroll down, this content could have been moved to index.js just the same. Now I want to take a moment to talk about this API folder. Folders are going to be paths in the URL. So if we visited /API/hello, we should hit this file. This is how an API endpoint is created in Next.js. So not only can you worry about front-end stuff, but you can build the API right in this application. So if you're familiar with creating Node.js applications, then the back end of Next.js is going to be very familiar to you. So let's take a moment to hit that API endpoint. We're not going to actually build out our API right now, but it's good to see how it works. So let's go ahead and launch this server. So npm run dev. And then visiting over on our site, we will go to localhost 3000 /API/hello, and we get name John Doe. So if we want to build a front end and not just an API, we can do the same concept inside of pages. We will create a new folder and we will call this customers. That's going to build the customers path. Now this is a folder, so if you visited /customers, it's not going to go anywhere. So whenever you want to say, hey, we want a file to be ran whenever we visit a path with no parameters passed in, that is going to be called index.tsx. So we'll create a new file and call it index.tsx. So now we have two index.tsx files. This first one is for the root path, and then this one is for the blank customers path. So let's go ahead and define a function in here. We'll say const customers. This is going to be a next page. That will be the type if you're using TypeScript. And then we will assign to this an arrow function and export default customers. Now inside of this function, all we will do is return an h1 saying customers. So this should automatically be associated with this path now, and you can see that text show up here. So what you'll probably end up seeing is a lot of folders with a nested index.tsx file. Now I wanted to call out one potential problem you might run into, especially if you've been following this series from the beginning, It's not a major problem, but if you're visiting your site and you're getting a 404, double check the actual URL you are visiting. You see, in this case, I'm visiting /customers with a capital C. And when I switch it to a lowercase c, we will get that page. So now it is working. This capitalization issue might show up because earlier on, when we were creating a React application, which was also on localhost 3000 at the time, used a capital C. So this value might be cached in your browser, and if that's the case, what you need to do is you need to type out whatever you're searching for and manually click the lowercase version, not the uppercase version. So that's kind of just an aside, but it is case sensitive, so you want this to be lowercase, and this matches with the customer's file. So for example, if we renamed this to uppercase C, we would then visit this at uppercase C. But I think in general it's preferred to have lowercase URLs, so we will go back and rename this to a lowercase c customers. Now hopefully my little lecture about capitalization wasn't too distracting, because now I want to move on and show you an alternative way of setting up files to associate them with certain paths on our web page. So right now this is a folder structure, which you can see here, but an alternative setup is to create a file directly in Pages. As an example, we will do employees and give this a TSX extension, and inside of here we will define a component, so const employees of type next page will be assigned a function, and then export default employees. Now we will just return an h1 saying employees. So this should be available at the employees path. So if we go to /employees, oh, you can see right there, auto capitalized it for me. So we don't want to do that. We want the lowercase e and select that one. And there we go. We've hit our employees component. So you'll see both of these structures, both the file directly inside of Pages and the index.tsx inside of whatever folder for the path. Now the question is, which one of these do you want to do? Well, I've personally grown to prefer the first option that we did with the folders, and I will explain why. It has to do with when you create a component that you parameterize so you can pass a value to it. So what if we wanted to visit a specific customer? Let's go back to the customers page. And we didn't want to get the entire list of customers. Instead, we wanted to pass in an ID such as 50. I will show you how to define this file. What we will do is we will go inside of the customers folder, create a new file, and create square brackets .tsx, and then whatever we put inside of the square brackets is what the parameter is going to be called. So for example, ID. So it's kind of a funky syntax, but that's exactly what it's going to look like. And I'm going to copy over some of the code from the customers. So we'll copy that and then paste that here, just changing this to customer and customer and singular customer. So let's see if we can visit this page. All we do is go to a / pass anything we want there, and you can see we got a singular customer. Because the way to set this up is to actually put it inside of a customers folder, I like to have the index file right there with it. So you can see this is for all the customers and this is for a single customer. To me, that's very organized. Now, if you have a file that's not going to be parameterized like that, then I think it would make sense just to leave it inside of the pages, such as how we did employees here. We didn't create a file to take an ID. But of course, you could just put everything inside of folders if you wanted to keep it consistent across all the pages. So if you had to pick just one of those options, I would go with the folder structure option, because then it's much more organized to have the index.tsx file associated with the parameterized TSX file. Now the question is, how do you actually get that value on the page? So if we wanted to display whatever ID was passed in inside of this H1, let's talk about how to do that. Now we're actually not going to need this employees file anymore, so I'm just going to nuke that. So now we just have customers with no ID and with an ID. So to do this, we're going to import something, and that is going to be a hook use router from next/router. And at the beginning of our component, we will say const router and assign this use router. Now, if we console log router real quick and run this page, you can see that router is in fact an object. And inside of here, we have a query property, which is an object, which has a property ID. So this ID is whatever you named that parameter here in the file. So we called it ID. So if we wanted to access that value, all we would need to do is jump into router and then jump into query and then grab ID. So this is what it's going to look like. Console log router dot query dot ID. Saving that, and now you can see we get the value 50. So that's exactly how we could display that value on the page. Now, another syntax you'll likely see, because we're not going to be console logging like that, would be just to destructure that object and grab the ID. So this is going to come from router.query. And now we can use that ID inside of our code right here. So taking a look at the page now, we have customer 50. Now I wanted to talk about the possibility of having even deeper nested content. So in that situation, we could do multiple layers of parameterization. So what that might look like is a folder inside of customers, and this will just be square brackets with the parameter ID. And then inside of this folder, we can create a new folder, which we could call orders, for example. And inside of orders, we can create a new file, index.tsx. So the path to access this would be /customers /some customer ID /orders. And let's just put some component in here. I'll just paste from the other one and change some of these values. So orders, all orders, and then export default orders. So let's just see if we can visit this page. We'll go over to our site and then do /50/orders. And it says all orders. So hopefully you're getting a better understanding of nested paths. We could also get a specific order for a specific customer if you want to practice that. But basically what we're going to do is inside of this orders, we will create a new file, parameterize it, order ID.tsx. And this one's going to be very similar to the ID.tsx. So I'm going to copy that, paste it here, and then just change some of this. So this will be called order singular, and we will change this to say order and export default order. Now the actual query is not going to have an ID. Instead it's going to have an order ID, so it's going to look like this: order ID and order ID. Now we should be able to access a specific order on any customer by saying 50/orders and then passing in some other value such as 40. Now, it doesn't look like that value is getting accepted on this page, so let's see what we did wrong. It's just a capitalization issue, so this should be a lowercase order ID to match the parameter passed in, and there we go, we get order 40. It's also important to note with the way we have this nested, the ID and the order ID is going to be available on this page. So we could grab both of those, and now we will display order ID from customer ID. And saving this, we'll display that. We got order 40 from customer 50. So if you ever need to access multiple parameters, that's how you do it. And you might want to take a good look at your naming conventions, because maybe in this case, just ID isn't a very good choice, because it's very easy to confuse what you're talking about. So maybe if you're having nested situations, maybe do customer ID and order ID. And if you ultimately decided you didn't want the orders to be nested inside of the customers, well, you could just move that structure. So you can take this orders folder and put it directly inside of, come on. Oh my God, where do I drop this thing? I don't want to drop it anywhere. Cancel. Okay, let's try this again. We could take orders and put it inside of pages and move. Now this page will still work, but we will no longer be able to get the customer ID. So you would say orders 40, for example, order 40 from customer. It's not going to work, so you're going to have to get rid of this section. And that's all you'll be able to do. And then you could delete this ID folder, which is no longer being used. So now you have it split up for customer section and an order section. So there's essentially unlimited ways of structuring your routes. You might not want to put your orders inside of that customer's path. You might just want to have that directly on the /URL. However you want to do it is totally up to you. I'm just showing you some of the possibilities. What we'll actually do is probably delete some of what we just created and just start with getting a list of customers and a single customer, and then you can build upon that if you wish. Stay tuned for the next episode where we're going to continue to learn more about the magical Next.js. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.